Alright everybody, welcome back. We're here in Unity again for just a minute to take a look at one of our old assets and learn something new about how we can make it a whole lot better. This is a process that you can apply to your old rocks as practice, and this is something that I expect you to do with the textures on your new models that you're creating right now. So when we look at our rock here, while the model itself is three-dimensional, the texture on the surface of it is still very much two-dimensional, very flat. So what we're going to be doing today is creating something called a normal map. You may have heard of something similar to this called a bump map. Both of these are methods for taking a 2D image and making it look more three-dimensional without doing any actual 3D modeling. It's more like an optical illusion. Now, in a perfect world, we could do this entire process in Photoshop, but the version of Photoshop that we're using actually won't be able to do exactly what we want today. So we'll be using an online service that's free and honestly a little bit easier than if we were doing it in Photoshop anyhow. So it's a really good option. So all that we need is our original texture, the same image that we're using to put the texture on the rock right now. If you don't still have this saved on your computer, that's okay, because you can always just make a copy of the image asset that you have in Unity. And moving forward, you should do this with all the textures that you create from here on out. Now, we could use Photoshop to create what's known as a bump map, which just gets the height data of our image. But we're going to be creating a normal map, which has a little more detail. It knows not only the height data, but also has data for the angle of all the bumps and ridges that are going to be on the surface. If it sounds complicated, well, it kind of is, but the good news is we don't need to do all this by hand. The process is mostly automated, and you don't have to understand every last part of it to make an effective normal map. So now let's jump over to our Chrome browser, and you can either Google search for normal map online, or I provided a link in Schoology if you just want to follow that, and it will take you to this website. So on the far left-hand side is where you will be adding your image. So you can either drag and drop it from your Finder into this location, or you can click on the nearby button, and that will open a Finder and you can select the file that way. The next image to the right shows us what the normal map will look like. This again is a 2D image, and most normal maps will have this generally sort of purple color to them, but you'll also see some other hues and shades, and all of that is data that's going to be represented in our texture as bumps, ups and downs, and the varying colors are used to represent the different angles that these paths travel on. It may look a little strange right now, but don't worry, these colors won't actually be showing up on your object. Finally, on the far right is a 3D model. This model is just an example of what our texture will look like on a 3D surface. Now there are a lot of different settings here. If you leave them alone, you'll probably get something that looks pretty good, but feel free to play around with them if you want. They can have a large effect on how drastic or subtle your texture is. If you want it to be very bumpy and very textured, you can crank those up by sliding those sliders to the right. If you want it to be more subtle, you can slide it to the left. You can also change the shape on which this is wrapped around. I usually like to use a sphere, but honestly, for what we're doing today, it shouldn't matter too much. A cube would also be fine. But now it's time to go find my file and bring it in. So I'm going to open my Finder, take my original file that I'm already using on the rock, and drag it into this far left block. It'll take just a second to load in, and now you can see our original texture, the normal map of the texture, and the preview of what our texture will look like on a surface. Now it's just time to give this normal map a name that we'll recognize and save it. Once we have it saved, we can simply click Show in Finder, and we can find it and simply drag and drop this into Unity as a new asset. Now you can see our purplish normal map amongst our assets, and from here it's very easy to apply this to our model. All we need to do is go down to our shader, make sure that its options are expanded, and then we're looking for the checkbox that says normal. So we have our one texture up here already in the albedo, and we're adding our new normal map to this box here where it's labeled normal map. So just click and hold, drag it over, and once you finish attaching it, you should notice a pretty dramatic change in the surface quality of your model. And there it is. You can see it's a pretty dramatic change. Overall, it's a big improvement. The only thing that I don't like is it does make some of the areas where I didn't fix my UVs perfectly a little more noticeable that they're stretched out. But really, all that does is inspire me to want to go back and fix that up and make it look a little bit better overall. So hopefully now you understand how normal maps work and how they can be a big improvement to your scene and the objects in them. Now, while I expect you to be using normal maps on your newest models that you're creating for your final project, you may not be ready to start working on the texture and the normal mapping right now. But this week, you should be taking the basic geometry that you've already got laid out. You should be refining it with more edges and manipulating those edges and vertexes and faces until you can create a model that's as close to your concept and artwork as possible. By the end of this week, you should be working on your UV layout and starting to paint it in Photoshop. Next week, you'll have just a little bit more time to finish your UVs, generate a normal map, get your finished object in the game, and then we'll be wrapping things up. So keep working on your models, share your progress in the comments on Schoology, and whenever you need help, feel free to shoot me a message on Schoology, and don't forget to drop by office hours. Alright, good luck and have fun.